Welcome back, everybody, to our deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're looking into this really cool concept. It's reshaping software development. Internal developer platforms, IDPs.
Yeah.
It's like we're handing developers a secret weapon to build amazing software even faster.
Yeah.
With less hassle.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it. We're basically talking about streamlining that entire software development process. Getting rid of those roadblocks, the ones that slow down innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And, I was reading through the research for this, and one thing really stood out to me, this idea of a hidden tax on innovation. And it sounds kind of scary.
Yeah.
What is that? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is all of those operational tasks that developers often get bogged down with.
Okay.
Like configuring infrastructure, managing dependencies,
Right.
going through those complex approval processes, all the stuff that takes time away from writing code and building those features.
So it's not that developers are lazy. They're just bogged down with things that maybe could be automated or simplified.
Right. I mean, it's not the best use of their time, and that's really where IDPs come in.
Yeah.
They really do act like this paved road that kind of smooths out the process and lets the developers focus on what they're best at, creating, innovating.
I really like that analogy. I was reading one of the sources, and it said, it's like asking a master chef to spend all their time scrubbing pots and pans.
Exactly.
Instead of like crafting delicious dishes.
Right.
So the IDP is like their sous chef.
I like that analogy. Yeah, exactly. It's giving them the tools and resources they need, and they're pre-configured with the best practices, whether that's security or performance or anything else.
Right.
So it's really taking care of all that prep work.
So instead of like fighting with the infrastructure or waiting for approvals, they can just jump right in and get building.
Exactly.
Cool.
And, with those opinionated defaults and guardrails, built right into the platform, they can move really quickly, but it's without sacrificing quality or security, which is a big thing.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm trying to imagine like a real world scenario. Can you
Yeah.
give me an example of how that plays out?
So, let's say a developer wants to spin up a new testing environment for their application.
Okay.
So traditionally, that might involve submitting a request to the operations team,
Right.
waiting for approval, then manually configuring the environment.
Right.
But with an IDP, they can just pick a predefined template
Okay.
from the self-service portal, click a button, and it's up and running in minutes.
Wow. That's incredible. So it's almost like instant gratification for developers.
Exactly.
But how about visibility?
Yeah.
How do IDPs help teams keep track of everything that's happening? Because there's a lot going on with software development.
Yeah, well, that's where unified observability comes in. So these IDPs provide a single dashboard that gives everyone, the developers, the operations team, managers, a clear view of the whole system. So you can see the status of deployments, track those performance metrics, identify bottlenecks, and even see how different parts of the system are interacting with each other.
So it's like X-ray vision into your software.
Exactly.
That sounds really valuable, especially for troubleshooting and optimization. But I feel like we've been talking a lot about the technical benefits.
Yeah.
What about the human side of things?
Right.
Why should we care about making developers happy?
Right. Well, that's crucial because happy developers, they're more productive, more creative, they're more likely to stick around.
Sure.
When developers are constantly battling, friction and frustration, it takes a toll.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll on morale and their ability to do their best work.
So it's not just about making life easier for developers.
Exactly.
It's about creating an environment where they can thrive and do their best work.
Exactly. And that has a ripple effect throughout the entire organization. When developers are happy and productive, you get better software faster, which ultimately benefits everyone. It's a win-win.
Yeah. I mean, this is all great stuff, but it sounds almost too good to be true.
Yeah.
Are there any downsides? Any potential downsides to IDPs?
Well, that's a fair question because just like any powerful tool, IDPs can be misused or implemented poorly. And one potential pitfall, I would say, is creating an IDP that's too rigid or too opinionated,
What do you mean by that?
Well, if an IDP forces developers into a very specific way of working, it can actually stifle creativity and innovation.
Okay.
So the key is to strike a balance between providing guidance and guardrails while still allowing for flexibility and experimentation.
So it's about empowering them, not restricting them.
Exactly. And another challenge I would say is making sure that the IDP is actually adopted by the development team.
Right.
Because if they see it as just another bureaucratic hurdle, it can backfire.
That makes sense. It sounds like communication and collaboration are key here.
Yeah.
You need to get the developers on board, and you need to make sure that they understand the value.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another big aspect of IDPs, the cultural shift they can trigger within an organization.
Right.
It's not just about implementing a new technology. It's about fostering a mindset of collaboration, ownership, and continuous improvement.
That's really interesting. So IDPs could be much more than just a technical solution. They can actually spark a cultural transformation within an organization.
Exactly right. And that's what we're going to get into next time.
Okay.
We'll explore how IDPs can reshape the relationship between development and operations teams. We'll talk about breaking down silos and fostering a more agile and collaborative way of working.
We were just talking about that cultural impact of
Yeah, right.
IDPs, and you mentioned like a shift in the relationship between development and operations teams. It sounds like IDPs could be what brings them together, because sometimes there's that kind of contentious divide between them.
Yeah, that's a key point. And I think traditionally there often has been a wall between those two groups.
Right.
Developers focused on building new features.
Yeah.
Operations teams are trying to keep everything running smoothly.
Right.
And that separation can cause bottlenecks, finger pointing, and it just slows down innovation.
Yeah, for sure. So IDPs help break down those silos and foster a more collaborative approach.
Exactly. Because it provides a shared platform and a common set of tools.
Yeah.
And it encourages those developers and operations folks to work together more seamlessly.
Right.
Developers get a better understanding of those operational concerns.
Okay.
And operations teams, they get a clear view of what developers are building.
It sounds like that could lead to a more holistic view of the entire software development lifecycle.
Yeah.
But how does that translate into real-world benefits? What are we actually talking about here?
Well, for starters, it can really speed up the delivery of new features and updates.
Wow.
When developers and operations teams are working together, they can identify and resolve issues more quickly, streamline that whole deployment process, and get new software into the hands of users faster.
Which in today's world is so important.
Exactly. That speed and agility are essential.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to stay ahead of the competition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about speed, right? It's about quality too and reliability.
Exactly. So when the developers and operations teams collaborate closely, they can build more robust and resilient systems.
Yeah.
Less prone to errors, less downtime.
Okay, I'm starting to see how IDPs can be a game changer,
Right.
especially for organizations looking to be more agile and responsive to change.
Right.
But let's go back to that idea of the IDP as a living product.
Okay.
What does that actually mean, like, in practice? What does that look like?
It means that an IDP is never really finished.
Okay.
It needs to be constantly evolving, adapting to the changing needs of that development team.
So it's not like a set it and forget it thing.
Yeah. Definitely not. The best IDPs are built with a feedback loop in mind.
Mhm.
Developers are actively involved in shaping the platform, making sure it meets their needs.
So the developers are the ones that are using the platform every day.
Yeah.
They're the ones that can best identify what needs to be improved.
Right. And when developers feel like they have a voice in the evolution of the platform, they're going to be more engaged.
Yeah.
And they're more invested in its success.
Right. So it creates that sense of ownership and empowerment that we were talking about.
Exactly. And we know that leads to happier and more productive developers.
Right.
And it's important to remember that that sense of ownership, it goes beyond the development team.
Okay.
With an IDP, everyone involved in software development,
Right.
from product managers to security teams to business stakeholders, they have a clearer view of what's happening and they can actually contribute to the process.
It sounds like IDPs can create a much more transparent and collaborative environment across the whole organization.
That's the goal. And, as organizations get more and more comfortable with IDPs, we're seeing them use them for more than just streamlining development workflows.
Okay.
Some companies are even using IDPs as a platform for innovation,
Really?
experimenting with new technologies and approaches.
Can you give me an example? Like, what would that look like?
Sure. So imagine a company that wants to explore, machine learning in their products.
Right.
They could use their IDP to create like a sandbox environment
Okay.
where developers can experiment with different machine learning frameworks and tools
Okay.
without having to set up complex infrastructure
Right.
or navigate through those bureaucratic hurdles.
That's really cool. It sounds like IDPs could become a breeding ground for new ideas.
Yeah.
Push the boundaries of what's possible with software development.
That's the exciting part. We're still kind of in the early days of IDPs.
Yeah.
And I think we've only just begun to scratch the surface of their potential. As the technology matures and more organizations are embracing this concept, I think we're going to see even more innovative and transformative use cases emerge.
That's inspiring. But before we get too carried away with the future, let's come back down to earth for a minute.
Okay.
Let's say I'm listening to this and I'm intrigued by the idea of IDPs, but I'm not really sure where to start.
Right.
What would you recommend? Yeah, that's a great question for someone just starting out. What would you recommend?
Well, I think the most important thing is to really understand, the specific challenges that they're facing in their own organization.
Right.
There is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to IDPs.
Yeah.
It depends on, the size and structure of the development team, the types of applications they're building, their overall organizational culture.
So step one is to look in the mirror. Really figure out the problems that an IDP can address.
Exactly. Are your developers spending way too much time on these manual tasks? Are you struggling to keep up with innovation? Are you having problems attracting and retaining top engineering talent?
Yeah.
Those are signs that an IDP might be a good fit.
Right. Okay. So once you've figured that out, then what? What's next?
Well, then it's time to start exploring the different IDP options.
Right.
So there are a variety of open source and commercial platforms available.
Okay.
And they all have their own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many options out there.
Yeah.
Any advice on how to narrow it down?
Well, I would start by seeing what other companies in your industry are doing.
Well,
There's a lot of knowledge sharing happening in the IDP community.
yeah.
So you can learn from the experiences of others who've already been down this path.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Are there any specific companies or case studies that come to mind that you'd recommend looking into?
Well, we talked about Spotify a little bit earlier, and their Backstage platform is a great example of an open source IDP that a lot of people have adopted.
Okay.
Another company that people often talk about is Netflix.
Okay. Yeah, and why are they so successful with their IDP?
They've really embraced the concept of developer self-service.
Okay.
And automation, their platform, lets developers spin up new environments really quickly, deploy code, and manage infrastructure really efficiently.
Right.
And that's been a big part of their ability to innovate and release new features so quickly.
Yeah, it's really impressive how they're able to move so fast. But it's like, are IDPs only for the big companies?
No, not at all.
Like a Spotify or a Netflix?
In fact, IDPs can be even more beneficial for smaller companies.
Okay.
The ones looking to scale up their development without adding a lot of overhead.
That makes sense. So instead of building out a whole big operations team,
Exactly.
they can leverage an IDP to give developers more autonomy and control.
Exactly. And with all those open source IDP platforms, the barrier to entry has really never been lower.
Well, this has been a really enlightening conversation.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the underlying principles of IDPs to the real world benefits. But as we wrap up here, is there any final advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out on their IDP journey?
I would say don't be afraid to start small.
Okay.
You don't have to build this massive, all-encompassing platform right out the gate.
Right.
You can start by just addressing a specific pain point or a use case and iterate from there.
So take a gradual approach, learn as you go, and build something that really meets the needs of the developers in the organization.
Exactly. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Right.
Building an IDP is a chance to really foster a culture of collaboration and innovation and continuous improvement.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into the world of internal developer platforms. I hope everyone found it as interesting and insightful as I have. IDPs are more than just a technological trend. They represent a fundamental shift in how we think about software development and delivery.
And, as software keeps, changing the world, the demand for speed, agility, and innovation will just get bigger and bigger. And IDPs are a really powerful tool for organizations that want to stay ahead of the curve and build amazing software that wows their users.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey.
Yeah.
I hope you learned something new and exciting about the future of software development.